Hey, how's it going? Dylan here. Today we're going to be presenting a discussion that I just had with Connor, the Media Man, and Mike, MCG So these guys are awesome. Obviously, I've done a collab with Connor before on Gods of Egypt. We had about an hour-long-ish conversation this morning about Event Horizon, which is one of my favorite kind of less appreciated horror sci-fi films, directed by Paul W.S. Anderson. So go check out their channels. I'll link them below and on the screen, kind of. And let's jump right into it and get to the discussion.
So, wanted to talk about Event Horizon.
Yeah.
A movie that I'm pretty fond of. So, I just wanted to ask you guys what you thought about it, basically.
It's like one of my favorite all-time space horror movies. It's pretty much probably the most iconic for me during the 90s, definitely, in terms of that kind of movie. And it's still like, I have this thing when I've watched it so many times, but it still makes me jump. And it's just really good use of sound and great actors and oddly a good movie from Paul W.S. Anderson.
Yeah.
This is a movie that I originally saw, I think a year or so after it had hit theaters.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I thought it was, okay. I thought it was fine. Did get kind of genuinely creeped out by its atmosphere and its setting.
Mm.
And then I've touched base with it every so often over the past, how many ever years it's celebrating almost an anniversary here.
Yeah.
But it's a film I definitely appreciate something a little bit different with it every time I rewatch it, whether it is, say, a performance from one of the actors, and I'm able to now recognize one of those actors from something that they're involved with currently. Like, I didn't realize back then like how many of these people would move on to become such big, kind of staple of actors and big franchises. And also the production, definitely. There's a good fair amount of Ridley Scott level of production design going on here that I feel could be just a film connoisseur or film aficionado's like visual pot of gold, so to speak.
Yeah, I think I first watched it when I was like really young, and I really loved it, and I didn't know anyone else that had either watched it or didn't hate it. For some reason, everyone I met would hate Event Horizon. And I finally first I went to high school, I managed to meet one other person who had liked it, and then I got on the internet and managed to find out that there were people that actually really loved the movie out there. So that was really nice. But for some reason, people tend to really hate this movie, which I don't understand.
Yeah,
I feel part. Oh,
no, you go ahead.
I feel part of it is too the fact that we weren't aware at the time of sort of the film's, not, I won't say troubled history, but there were some complications with regards to the cut we eventually got in theaters compared to what W.S. Anderson had in mind originally. Yeah. And we might get into that a little bit later, but definitely I think now especially since it's garnered sort of a cult following over the years, and internet has this word of mouth of like, oh, actually there's a whole bunch of footage and cuts out there that you haven't witnessed yet that improve a great deal of the criticisms maybe.
Yeah, it's definitely probably the case. It's a really interesting story, and it kind of like the one thing I really like. Did you guys listen to the commentary at all for this?
No, not yet.
Okay. So the commentary for this is actually really interesting. In terms of it's Paul W.S. Anderson and his main producing partner Jeremy Bolt, and they go through and talk about it, and it's quite like they're quite candid in the commentary about like what they had, the extras they had, what they filmed, what didn't make it in, as well as like kind of looking at the way things were done, and it's quite a kind of entertaining commentary.
Oh, awesome. I gotta get into listening to more commentaries.
Mm.
Because I rewatched it last night, and something that I found that I was feeling on this rewatch was it kind of felt like a 80s movie that somehow got made at the end of the 90s.
Yep.
So it's got like really, really great practical effects, and then just occasionally bad CGI.
Yeah. So
Which is
Especially
fun.
that opening shot with all the stuff floating in space.
oh yeah, the CG 0G stuff is absolutely really early CG stuff. It's really bad. But like all the miniatures almost all the miniatures shots are fantastic.
Yeah.
There's one specific shot of I forget the name of the rescue ship.
The Lewis and Clark.
That's
Lewis
it,
and Clark.
Lewis and Clark. The intro shot of that is a horrible shot. They like sped up the camera turn around the model, and then the superimposing of like the switch to live action is really bad. But in the commentary, they actually call out saying that's a terrible shot. But all the other miniature shots are actually really well done. It's mainly just falls down with sometimes a little bit of compositing, but and the CG CG parts, but most of it's practical.
Yeah. I found because I switched it on and it opens with that shot of all the stuff floating. I looked at my housemate and I said, "Look, all right, there's some bad CG, but bear with it."
Yeah. It's I've always pointed that out, like that first shot with the water bottle, which looks like it's like a pre-rendered cutscene from like an early '90s video game.
Yeah.
It has that kind of sheen to it, and nothing looks kind of right. Yeah, the practical effects in this are really good. Like the main hallway down the center of the ship, they only build a tiny bit of it, and it's just a big mirror.
Yeah.
To make it look long, and then they just kind of place the camera in the right place so you can't see the reflection.
Right.
Mm.
With regards to like say prosthetics and things like that, it is a coin toss because I'm just recalling like Weir's first like haunting revelation where
Yep.
is it I forget the woman's name, but she's missing her eyes, and that's clearly just superimposed CGI eye sockets.
Yeah.
But then later on, it makes up for it with his actual transformation where he's not on fire, but you can see like all the makeup effects and things that went into his transformation.
Yeah, so they showed like obviously there's a lot more of that they wanted to show, but they didn't end up in the cut. And the eyes, I believe, they used like a prosthetic, but then they actually CGI'd over it.
It's
to
like
get
the Think
back,
remake.
yeah, to get like the back eye sockets kind of thing.
Speaking of the opening CGI shot, did you guys ever notice that the book Flying Past is Paul W.S. Anderson's autobiography?
I
Or his
did not.
biography?
No.
No, I didn't notice that.
Yeah, I didn't notice. I watched a video last night on like Event Horizon trivia, and apparently that's his book.
Well, I mean, if you're gonna self-aggrandize, why
Yeah.
not? At this point, how many films had he made?
He'd only made
Shop,
two, I think.
Shopping and Mortal Kombat.
Yeah,
Correct?
yeah.
Yep.
He came
I always
straight off
forget.
Mortal Kombat to do this. And I think he should go back to sci-fi horror. Because anything else that he's done really... I mean, like the early Resident Evils have like a bit of a cult following.
Right.
But the later ones, like the last one, was absolutely horrible.
It feels weird because all of his movies to me kind of feel like they really feel like products. Like it's a video game movie. It feels a lot like a studio film.
Yep.
And Event Horizon feels so much like a vision, like something he was really passionate about.
Correct, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know if he was like disheartened by the reception to it and he just went off to do other things, but
well, yeah, they gave him what, like, was it 4 weeks to deliver a cut?
Yeah,
after
4 weeks.
production, which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
But obviously he only done 2 movies, so he probably didn't have the power to kind of say no.
And also, I think part of it too is that maybe that was kind of the challenge he was hoping he'd meet, was because he's something of a contemporary, or at least sort of influenced by Roger Corman and his style of like producing and movie making, in which Roger Corman's known to churn out hundreds of movies a year almost. It feels like, on limited budget within the span of just a couple of weeks. And at the time, I think he was like under his tutelage, I believe. I'm not entirely 100% certain, but maybe just because of the fact he couldn't recoup in the way Roger Corman would on a similar type of movie with a similar plot. Maybe that was kind of like, okay, let's play it safe with well-known franchises.
Yeah, and he like, obviously he's a fan of Resident Evil, and that's why he was so kind of, he's been so kind of, that's his kind of series. Like,
and his wife needs to work.
Well, so. yes, Mila. And yeah, it's kind of interesting. Like, this one had a really good budget, as well. So it's kind of interesting. This actually got that budget, like in that time, because it absolutely flopped at the box office. But it's interesting seeing the studio actually put that much money into it. Which is probably why we got the nice miniatures and things like that.
Yeah. Speaking of the CGI and the practical mixing, there was one scene when I was watching it this time that stuck out to me. Right after Justin gets sucked into the vortex or the gravity drive and they pull him out, there's a shot of all the coolant floating around, which doesn't look great because they probably had no idea how to do CGI for like moving liquids yet. But as soon as the gravity comes back in, it all turns into this like black coolant liquid and falls down, and it looks amazing when it turns liquid again. It's a really interesting mix of the two that I appreciated in a way.
Yeah, it's actually really well done, the way they actually got it to fall. Like, I mean, obviously they probably just they just set points to go down, and then they kind of added the CG after to match the position. But yeah, it does work really well, that shot.
Yeah,
it feels very much along the lines of, you know, using every part of the cinematic buffalo, as it were, even though it isn't the most appealing or appetizing part of it. Is that sure, this CGI, I don't know if they mentioned it in the commentary or not, is, you know, they own up to maybe it was, maybe this serves as just a placeholder and we eventually just couldn't get it as rendered as beautifully as we wanted it to and just had to settle for it. But
I mean, I think in the commentary they mentioned like the coolant wasn't originally in the script, and they thought of it on the set, like to have that kind of stuff going around. I think, if I remember correctly, and that apparently they had literally like one of their main VFX people quit the industry after working on Event Horizon because of how much they sent back revisions. To get certain shots right.
Yeah. Well, speaking of, while we're on effects and everything, on practical effects, the design of the Event Horizon itself might be one of my favorite spaceship designs in like anything.
Right.
It's definitely one of the most unique kind of spaceship designs in terms of like references.
Do you guys know where the design came from? What they used to make it?
Yep. So wasn't it parts of the Notre Dame? And like lots of Gothic kind of designs.
Yeah.
Well, that makes sense. Whenever I actually see the interior of the ship, now that I guess we'll get into spoilers here. Should we discuss? So if you're dealing with these ideas of like a hellscape, you know, type realm within space and within this sort of confined thing, whenever I rewatched it, it did evoke like something along the lines of, okay, Dante's Inferno, here we go into this circle of hell almost, and this one, and it gives a very draconian feel to the whole proceeding.
I really love the concept of this film because I always think about it in comparison to, because obviously it gets a lot of inspiration from Alien, and there's a lot of other films you can tell were inspired by Alien, and they always tend to just, we're going to do our monster in space. Yep. Whereas this film has such an interesting idea about what they're fighting. I really love it every time.
Yeah, I mean, they're fighting basically, it's not something they can really physically see, like feel or see. It's more what it's doing to them that they're fighting. So it's great in that terms. That's why one of the reasons why I've always liked the film. I probably saw it when I was too young originally, but because it scared the crap out of me. Like, God. And those scares still do. Like, I still think they're some of the best kind of noise. Like, just the way, even in moments where they're not supposed to be kind of full-on scare mode, like some of the door openings and things like that, there's just a sudden sound from quiet, and it works really well.
Yeah, I still can't stand the one scene where Weir is in the crawlway.
Oh, I love that scene.
Fix things. That scene freaks me out still.
Yeah. I last night when I was watching it again, in that scene, I'm always, even though I know exactly what's coming, I always still jump, and I'm like, oh, is it this time? No, it's not that time. Oh, no, it's this kind of thing. Like which time the lights go off that she appears. And every time it still makes me jump out of my chair.
It's drawn out just long enough that you can never pick it.
Yeah, and that's why I think that Paul Douglas Anderson really should get back to that kind of stuff. But I don't know if he will.
Yeah, I think it's very much like I don't have like a deep-seated like affection for the film as much as you guys do apparently, but I do appreciate that there are a lot of like really well orchestrated like tense sequences throughout. Narratively, I feel there are some disjointed parts, but I feel that's more having to do with the version I eventually got to watch as opposed to like what was left out or on the cutting room floor. But yeah, you mentioned the Alien influence. I also feel there's a bit of the Nightmare on Elm Street type aesthetic going for this, where again, you mentioned it's not something they can tangibly like confront or even see at times, and very much along the lines of like a Freddy movie where the rules kind of just go out the window at times with how it's going to affect you, how it's going to mess with you,
and what they're perceiving.
What they're actually perceiving. It varies from person to person.
So like the sick bay scene is actually one of my favorites. With the kid with the legs. That scene, the tension in that scene is really well done. And like every time still puts me on edge.
Yeah. Just the visuals on their own are like unsettling.
Well, and if you think about what's actually was also shot for that scene, it could have been even more unsettling with like maggots in the legs.
Speaking of that character, I've always something that always stuck with me is right before she dies, when she falls off that catwalk thing, there's a brief flash where she takes a breath, where she actually sees her own corpse for a second. And that always freaked me out so much that they would show her that right before she died. I always thought it was really sinister.
Yeah, I noticed that last night. I'd actually forgotten about it.
Yeah.
It's just it's not just that it's like deadly and dangerous, but that whatever this entity is unnecessarily cruel. With regards to its trickery almost.
One thing that I do really appreciate about the film is that the concept is really complex, like really interesting and has a lot of layers to it, but the actual story or like the structure of the film is really simple. Where it's just they get on the ship for a rescue mission, their ship is busted, and they've got X amount of time to get off, and the ship's going to try and kill them before they can leave.
And I notice this is actually funny because I watched Sunshine recently again, and obviously that has a very similar kind of setup. in terms of the other ship and things like that, which I think is a nice kind of parallel.
I really like Sunshine.
Yeah, I do as well. But yeah, it just occurred to me because I'd watched both of these recently that I was like, oh, they kind of, the basic those parts of the story are very similar.
Yeah.
In terms of what they're doing and what ends up happening, kind of thing.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to say is that I love Sam Neill in this movie.
Yes.
He's so good, and I think that is kind of a little bit unappreciated in this, and also Dead Calm, which is a fantastic film. But
that's
not many
with
people know about.
Billy Zane and Nicole Kidman.
Yes,
right?
yes, yeah, 80s, really early on, early 80s, I think it was.
Yeah.
It's really cool. It's an Australian film, obviously, that early in their careers. But it's like a thriller on a boat, nice. And it's quite good, but not many people really talk about it.
Yeah.
I have to agree with you on the underutilization of Sam Neill, especially with regards to the shifts that his character takes, and that actually ties in a little bit to the idea of one thing I really appreciate about the film that probably gets a lift or two from Alien is that you start off this not really knowing who your protagonist, or not protagonist, but your point of view character is going to be. Throughout the whole film, it's constantly shifting. At one point, you think it's going to be Sam Neill, and then that's shot out, and then all of a sudden you think Lawrence Fishburne is going to be your, hero, as it were. But obviously, that takes a drastic turn towards the end.
Yeah. It's interesting. And I love that. Like, obviously, it's a horror film, so you need that end kind of jump when you think everything's fine. It's a bit cliche, but it's really well done in this one.
Yeah. I actually also really like Lawrence Fishburne in this, as like just a no nonsense captain. But then when it comes to the scenes where the ship messes with him, you can see a lot of emotion on his face.
Yeah.
In regards to what happened to him with the person that died on his watch.
He's pretty much always turns in a great performance. He's kind of always on, no matter the kind of film, to me. Which is why I always enjoy watching him. But he does give a really cool performance in this, and I just have to say about his chair on the Lewis and Clark, that bloody chair. Apparently
that'll come back in the Matrix.
Yeah. Apparently he loved his chair on the production. And I laugh every time when the first time they're going to board the Event Horizon, and he waits to turn his chair right around to get off. It's like the slowest turn, and it's like, why don't you just stand up from your chair? It doesn't make any difference.
Because I have a chair that can turn ominously, so I'm going to use it.
Exactly. It's pretty funny, and there's a lot of explosion and practical effects in this as well. Which
absolutely.
Are really cool. Like the scene with Sean Pertwee jumping from his chair. That's all real. And apparently he almost he was afraid of his privates getting burned off.
Well, he's the one with the fire extinguisher, or no, that's Jason Isaacs with the fire extinguisher, putting out stuff, and he's in the thick of it. You can tell he's not green screened in or anything. No. He's amongst sparks flying and explosions and
So he's pretty great, and he doesn't get many big kind of roles most of the time. But he's kind of fairly one of those actors who just turns up randomly in various films.
Oh, which one was that? Sorry.
Is it Sean Pertwee?
Pertwee, yeah.
One of the third Doctor's son.
Yeah, he plays he plays Alfred on Gotham.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I really like him. He's in another horror movie that I love called Dog Soldiers.
Yep. He also he has somehow looks similar in his face to Richard Roxburgh sometimes. They have similar kind of features. But yeah, he it's good. He's in Gotham nowadays, but he kind of has all these small little parts.
Right.
One of the explosions that I really love, and I love the way they did it. Well, not an explosion, but the fireball that chases Lawrence Fishburne.
Oh yeah.
That is a 100% practical effect.
Yeah.
They had an actual
giant
flamethrower.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which also, speaking of, apparently, because that's one of my favorite visuals is that hallway with the cylinders
Yes.
and the lights. But apparently that was a nightmare to walk down. Apparently everyone would fall over or
Oh yeah,
lose their equilibrium while they were going down it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm genuinely curious how disorienting of an experience being on that set was.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing. It's like, this is back in the day when that was an actual set. And these days, you know, it would be completely like 10 feet of green screen, probably with a platform to walk across and so forth. And then everything's put in later. But there where you actually had, say, the long corridor. Now, obviously, like the cheese grater rotating thing, I don't know if that was actually put in there at any point.
No, it was real. Yeah. They did build that. I believe they used the Pinewood the Bond stage. To build, they built the entire set of Lewis and Clark as one set, like a multi-level set kind of thing. And I believe they did this similar thing to most of the Event Horizon sets. So it's a big stage.
Oh, nice. I always get bummed out when I see the posters or the Blu-ray cover where it's just floating Sam Neill and Lawrence Fishburne heads with like a tiny bit of the Event Horizon at the bottom.
Yeah,
when the one shot of Justin standing in front of the gravity drive is the best image to me. That should so be the cover of the film.
Yeah, I like one of those because it does deserve a better poster, and hopefully, like it's shot and finished on film, so we might eventually get an Ultra HD release.
Right.
Probably much later down the line because it didn't make money. But it seems like this year they're kind of putting like a lot of backlog releases up.
Yeah,
I will say, like, coming back to it now with a high definition picture, there's a lot more to appreciate. Like, back when I would rewatch it, I'd get it from, say, Blockbuster, and it would be, you know, VHS quality at the time and formatted to fit your screen.
Yep.
But with this one, like, I rewatched it just on Amazon Prime yesterday, and like just the little details of like the skulls embedded into the walls of the ship and the blood and sinew just dripping off of it. Like, it's so intricate and detailed now that you couldn't see it back in the day, probably even like 97 on a big screen even.
Yeah, definitely. It's it definitely has a lot of like that newer transfer gives it a lot more oomph. And there's a funny thing about that is that Paramount actually botched the transfer slightly. The aspect ratio isn't technically correct. Like it's slightly out, and it's apparently basically they like it's because it's an anamorphic presentation. They basically didn't de-squeeze it quite correctly. So it's like everyone's slightly taller than they should be.
Yeah, I was about to say Lawrence Fishburne looks a little too much like Obama sometimes.
So everyone looks a little bit too thin. Like if you compare it to the DVD release, like the original DVD release, they look wider. But it's not enough to annoy me. But I only found that out last week when I was like, when I was looking online, a bunch of people were complaining about it.
One thing that I really like about Event Horizon is it manages to lend itself to theories really well. One of the things I really love is the idea that Hellraiser and Event Horizon take place in the same universe.
Yep.
I've heard that theory as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Every time I watch it, there's like another little thing I see that makes me appreciate that idea. Like, which actually makes sense because the gravity drive was inspired by the puzzle box from Hellraiser.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, and the other dimension, and when they actually Jason Isaacs' death, he gets strung up on the hooks just like the Cenobites do.
Right.
And there's also the Warhammer one.
He's just missing a Jesus wept moment.
Yeah.
Have you seen?
Could you
Oh, sorry.
Could you imagine if Anderson would have been able to get someone like Clive Barker in on this too. Like, just how much that would have, like, it's clear he's going for that emulation, but like if Clive Barker had actually had an opportunity to really focus in on this.
Yeah.
I reckon he probably would have done it. But it just depends on, because it's fairly early in Paul W.S. Anderson's career, so he might just not have had the confidence.
Yeah.
To do it. And actually, speaking of influence from Alien and Aliens, it's actually shot by the same cinematographer as Aliens. So there you go.
That kind of makes sense.
Yeah. Is it Adrian Biddle?
Yeah, Adrian Biddle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do really appreciate the more so than like any other sci-fi horror. It feels like a haunted house in space.
Yep.
Especially the clouds. It's sitting in the clouds, so all the windows have the cloud rolling by constantly. The Gothic design to the ship itself, it all just has this really ominous feel from as soon as they get on the ship.
Yeah, it's almost instantaneous.
Mm-hmm.
And it's further enhanced by the fact that this is, as is the case with a lot of these movies, it is a very muted vision of the future with regards to its color scheme. Like all the cold steel grays throughout all of the designs of both ships that just make you feel just so not desensitized, but very morose in response to the proceedings.
Everything about it, like even the user interface design, it's all grimy, but still not completely fake looking. Like for the time, the user interface probably actually looks quite realistic. Like on all their screens, they had physical screens and stuff. And apparently Paul W. Sanderson is really specific about interfaces, like designing of them. Like he doesn't want it just to be like something like a 2-hour job or whatever. So like he kind of wanted that kind of lived in feel, usable feel, not pristine for everything.
Yeah. Quick question: how do you guys feel about the scene where they watch what happened to the original crew of the Event Horizon when they got the video going?
Yeah, I think the scene's fine. I like knowing the stuff that they cut out of that scene. I think it could have been more horrifying, but I think in the end, I kind of prefer this version because it kind of leaves a bit more to the imagination.
Yeah, that's something I always come back and forth with. Was do I want more, or is it better to leave a little bit out and have it slide?
Yeah, I'd have to kind of agree in that part because I think half of it too is with regards to what is more implied, what is more kind of, like you said, left up to the imagination with regards to that. And also, I don't know, given kind of the way movies have gone recently, where they're now into what we call the torture porn version of films, is that I'm kind of appreciative of Event Horizon's somewhat restraint, even with the footage that I glimpsed here and there that wasn't included. It's relatively, a little bit more subdued than what you would get probably these days.
Yes, yeah.
Say a Saw movie or something.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel that's more kind of horrific and that's more kind of unsettling is, you know what? You don't get to see all of it in its graphic goriness, but, just enough is fine.
Even like, I actually want to talk about the sound mix of this. Even like the volume level differences are really well done in this film. Like if you have it at proper volume, like it goes way and above that when there's kind of when it wants to. Like for instance, the first time they hear the transmission, the hellish sound of the transmission of them and the Latin. Like it's really loud and really unsettling. The way that's done.
I think right after they view that video. It's one of my favorite reactions in like in horror.
Yeah.
All right, let's go.
Yeah, we're getting up. We're going. Yeah, that is pretty good.
Fluorescent green mazes ahoy!
Yes. Yeah. What do you guys think of Richard T. Jones in this as Cooper, Lieutenant Cooper?
Oh,
like his lines in this are hot and black, something inside you, and all that.
I don't mind him. I like him as the comedy relief, but he
Yeah.
also is in the only scene in this film that I genuinely don't like. When the Lewis and Clark explodes and he's floating away, like
yes,
really far away
from Neptune. He's like on an exit velocity, basically.
Yeah. And he manages to release his oxygen and fly back to the ship. That's the one bit where my suspension of disbelief just goes completely out the window.
Yeah, that is a really bad shot, and I don't think it should really be in it.
No.
It shouldn't show how far him being that far away at all. It just shouldn't have showed him at all, and then have him come back, kind of thing.
Yeah.
You didn't really need to show that particular scene. Not to mention the really bad compositing job of that scene as well. Yeah.
It's ambitious for certain with regards to that sequence in particular, but yeah, you can't help but kind of giggle a little bit when it's like, okay, all right, propulsion works like that, I guess.
Yeah.
Inertia in zero G, absolutely sure. Why not? In a vacuum, that's totally possible.
Yeah.
I'll buy it. It's Event Horizon.
Well, yeah, it's interesting in that respect. I think the zero G sequences are actually pretty well done in this as well. Like they're not like all the time. The reason in the commentary they go into why the reason that they didn't do many zero G is that originally it was all going to be zero G, but obviously that is like the quality is going to way drop and it's going to be really hard. Y works really hard, but I like the amount they did in this. Like the amount that's there looks really nice and works. Like it's not the most realistic, but it doesn't look bad.
There are definitely some points where I feel like this would be right at home right now with 3D releases.
Yeah.
Whenever you see a glob, like you said before, with the black liquid substance floating around, it's like that would feel right at home right now with some modern day 3D, honestly. And it would probably work, but the marriage between what objects are actually there and which ones are rendered. Yeah, every once in a while I have to shut off that uncanny valley part of my brain and just be like, not quite there yet. But
yeah, it's pretty early on in that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think it's it's a nice looking film in general.
Yeah,
like well shot. And go ahead.
I think if they had done the zero G sequences too, that would throw in, maybe a little bit more, I don't know, of an ominous feel because of the fact that it's not so much things are rapidly approaching you or anything like that. It would probably be more like for example, the corpse that's just floating there when she gets on board, and that image on its own is enough to creep me out. And imagine just seeing, like, say, the charred corpses kind of just floating around without having fake superimposed flames on them.
Yeah.
It would be a lot more effective.
The lighting in this is also really well done. And like when she's on the bridge just before she sees that corpse, or just after, I think it is, when in the background the lights flicker on and you can see all the skulls and the blood in the background.
Yeah.
It's just really well timed, and I think like the pacing of that kind of stuff is good. Like it's only it's an hour and a half movie. Like for the edit we got, I think it's kind of pretty well paced. In terms of everything being spread out, but obviously it'd be interesting to see the full 2-hour cut.
So that has never been a release then, the full like uncut.
No, because they have lost the basically because it was because of the small time that he had to edit it. When he delivered the 2-hour cut, it was only roughly done on basically it wasn't done on film. It was delivered in some kind of format. I think it was a VHS tape, they said.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, so that was the rough cut, and that's what they showed to studio execs, and a bunch of them walked out.
Yeah.
And felt sick. Basically, they said to tone it down. So that's like the only copy of that, and I think they basically, like, when he edited it properly down to the studio one, they didn't really have the negatives anymore of the extra shots. I believe they've either been lost or destroyed. So he managed to find, I think he said he managed to find some of them. Basically, oh, that's right, actually. They stored them in a salt mine. Yeah, that's right.
In Transylvania.
They bought, the studio bought a salt mine to store the extra film, and they just dumped it all there. And when they found it, it was in such a state of disrepair that, it wouldn't work. Like, they could probably salvage some of the shots, with digital restoration techniques, but it's money. But supposedly he did find that original VHS recently, but he just hasn't watched it.
So basically, in order to appreciate probably a lot of the stuff that went wayside in the cut, you'd have to basically pause and go frame by frame, especially towards the end with all the montage of the torture sequences and things like that.
Yeah, so the VH, like, they might end up, like, you never know if they do a re-release at some point. They might end up doing like what Umbrella did with, say, Razorback just the other day. Because Razorback, for instance, it's an Australian film. It was distributed by Greater Union here, one of our cinema chains, and it was an R-rated film when it was submitted. Like, it was really gory, and Greater Union didn't want that for their cinemas. So because they were the producer as well, they said, you cut it down. Like, so they basically cut out all the gore in Razorback. You don't see anyone die. It's quite funny, actually. Like, it pretty much just cuts between, like, the before and after of kills. But it still works. But there are stuff that's supposed to be in between that. So they cut out all of that, and they kind of did that. And the original cut only exists on VHS because they did an R-rated VHS cut of that. But there's no negative because there was no theatrical release of it. So Umbrella, basically, they released the restoration of the theatrical cut, and on the same Blu-ray you can watch a VHS rip of it, of the R-rated cut.
Okay.
So it's really bad quality, but it's there. It's the kind of thing, because it's the best look, like the best vision you could get of it, possibly.
Yeah. One thing I always find really amusing whenever I look into the background of Event Horizon is that when he showed it to the studios, they told him to go back and turn it into a PG movie.
Oh, yeah.
Ha! Yeah.
I can't imagine that being possible.
Yeah.
Well, here's a question I pose to you all, is that if this were to be released today, would it actually get that PG rating? Because it seems like there's a sliding scale with regards to, what constituted an R a couple years ago compared to now.
Yeah, it's like Predator is only rated M here. It's hilarious. It's the funniest thing I've ever seen. And it's the same with a lot of 80s, really. Like, in Australia, at least, in the 80s, we were really lax with ratings, and basically almost everything got through with like an M, which is our like less than 15 plus rating, and like, so it's basically like a PG-13 specific, like kind of like that. But then you hit the 90s, and almost everything is R. Like the classification board, like, obviously they got a bunch of new people. And they kind of just did completely different. We don't actually have a set of rules here in Australia for ratings. No. So they basically just do what they want.
Yeah. I'm just trying to put myself in the mindset of, say, an executive in the 90s, where if they had sort of the foresight of what we're putting into R-rated movies these days, with regards to the uncut stuff or the lost footage stuff, that would still be an R. I don't think they would have soured the rating anymore. So if it was like this year, there's a lot of stuff that kind of flies in an R-rated movie these days. So
I mean, it's a bit different because I know in the US you guys have you have R and then NC.
NC-17, which is NC-17 is kind of a really, I don't know, it varies wildly, I guess. I think NC-17 is more along the lines for, say, more mature sexual themes and things like that. Like David Cronenberg's Crash is an NC-17 here. But so, that makes sense because that whole movie's dedicated to fetishizing car crashes and people having sex in car crashes, and
so
it's graphic in that
our
sense.
Equivalent would be like our R is that basically. Our R is 18 plus.
Okay.
Whereas our MA would probably be closest to the American R.
Okay.
Which is 15 plus restricted. So yeah, it's a bit different, but yeah, I get what you mean in terms of that, like studios not wanting to go for it. I mean, these days studios are a bit more lenient to R releases as long as the budget isn't massive most of the time.
Yeah, in terms of like violence and gore, it's really lenient on that because I feel they're kind of just saying, well, people are kind of desensitized, and you know, with regards to say they know it's not real, or which is kind of a detriment, I'd say, to filmmaking these days, is that the fact that you have a lot more CGI gore and things like that. Like Event Horizon, if it were made today, I would wager a guess that a lot of the stuff we appreciate on a practical level would be not there in favor of okay, let's hack off CGI limbs, or
it would definitely be a different beast, and probably a different type of atmosphere, most likely.
Very cartoony almost, and it's kind of at times it borders on the cartoony at certain points, but it always has that gritty kind of realism and certain moments and certain scares.
Yeah,
definitely.
Well, you've got the moment where Lawrence Fishburne sees the guy on fire. It's the kind of odd looking fire, but then it completely morphs into Sam Neill in this full body suit that looks really cool.
Yeah, definitely.
And like I was saying, the only thing that's kind of a detriment of that is I would have just liked the charred body to just be the charred body, but then it's got those superimposed flames on it. I kind of giggle every time I see like that. I'm kind of like, we don't need the flames. We can do without them. It'd be creepy enough without them.
Yeah, definitely. It's it's a bit over the top there.
Also, Event Horizon has one of my favorite scenes of someone explaining science to people, just because I've always loved the analogy with the paper. Explaining faster than light travel.
Folding space and time.
Yeah. Which is straight up in Interstellar. It's the exact same scene as in Interstellar, which I always like.
Yeah, and I like the fact also what's on the paper. It just makes it funnier as well.
Nudie mags and things like that.
But he just doesn't care.
I mean, if anything, that's a testament to say like the writing of the film, and that they're not like just that has a root in some kind of scientific basis of some sort.
Yeah, it's not just complete like nonsense. It kind of it's kind of a little bit smart in that respect. It doesn't go overboard with just random scientific sounding things.
It sets up
sorry, go.
Oh no, sorry. It sets up a believable enough thesis, and then you can put the hellscape in there, the hell dimension in there.
Yeah, it doesn't get too complicated either. It's just a simple explanation, and it works because of that.
I find the idea to be somewhat plausible to the point where you can connect to the characters of like there being this other dimension.
And it doesn't have to go explain about it either. It's just like there is another place, and you don't really learn anything about it, but that doesn't matter.
No. So glad you don't as well. I'm so glad it's not a scene where they go into the other dimension because it could potentially ruin it.
Which these days you'd probably get that.
Well, then that it brings me to this idea, because we've been talking about like what we feel Event Horizon pays a lot of homage or lip service to with regards to its influences or predecessors. Do you feel there's any movies recently that you feel take a page out of Event Horizon's book? And
probably Cloverfield Paradox.
Yes, I was going to bring that up. I'm glad you did too. It's like almost the instant I saw where that movie was going, I'm like, Event Horizon did it better, I felt.
Yeah, they definitely did it better, which is one of the main things that I kind of like about Cloverfield Paradox is because of that kind of thing. But I like how it's shot, which is similar to Event Horizon. There's a lot of similarities, really, but it has a similar feel to it. But obviously the implementation isn't anywhere as good.
Right. Well, you were saying like glad they don't really get full on into what other realm there might be. It's like that's kind of what Paradox is all about, is
correct
the other realm and how do you get out of there.
It's interesting. There's probably like obviously I said like Sunshine before, which has some similarities like in theme and kind of plot points, but they're kind of simple plot points, so it's not really copying per se. It's kind of just like something that works as a story structure.
I'm not sure about any movies, but did either of you guys ever play any of the Dead Space games?
Yep.
I never did. I've heard a lot about them though. Yeah.
I played the first one, and it does have very similar kind of feel.
Because I remember I had a book, because I really liked the Dead Space series, and I had a book written by the game developers, and there's a bit where they talk about their main inspirations, and they said that the Alien, The Thing, and Event Horizon were what they based the whole series on.
Yep.
Where the creatures in Dead Space look like the creatures from The Thing. It's got the claustrophobic feeling of Alien and the presence of a force that messes with your mind from Event Horizon, which is a perfect combination because they're like my three favorite sci-fi horror movies.
Definitely. I can't think of any other movies or TV at the moment that would be kind of similar.
It is a movie that I would absolutely love to see remade by someone that would take the project seriously.
Yep. Yeah, someone like another kind of director with their own kind of vision for it.
Yeah,
definitely.
Especially nowadays with we're getting a lot of really great horror movies, really quite grounded things.
Yeah, high concept type of films as well. Like in an era where you've got, the quality obviously varies, but where you've got concepts ranging from It Follows to, your typical haunted house, or even revivals such as like Blair Witch. It's like, I'm sure there's room for, I'm sure there's room for.
Yeah, I'd love to see
Horizon.
Ari Aster. I kept saying Ari Aster should do a space horror.
That would be a very depressing, like, oh my god.
I was. He's already got one of his projects he has in mind is a sci-fi though, supposedly. So,
nice.
He has like 10 projects written or something. So yeah, we'll see.
If we can get a Suspiria remake, I reckon there's a good chance maybe get an Event Horizon remake.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, here's the thing: is would we want to say remake, or would it be sort of a soft reboot continuation of this universe?
Reboot would be a good way to go.
Okay. And you'd need to have some kind of cameo by Sam Neill.
Yeah.
Like have him be like someone that died or something, like I don't know. Some connection.
I mean, he could be the franchise's pinhead. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's in the same continuity or not. He'll always kind of be there in some degree, shape, or form.
Yeah. I suppose they've got a good segue with the remaining section of the ship.
Well, yeah. I guess you could technically do that.
Yeah, I always liked the implication right at the end when the door closes, where it's somewhat ambiguous as to whether that part of the ship is also affected.
Right.
Yeah.
Because they never do establish if it is just the gravity drive itself or if the whole ship like whether it disconnects, that would change anything.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think that's kind of why I was kind of in the camp for a sort of continuation, just because that ending kind of leaves you saying, and then what?
Yeah. It's pretty good. And that vision just before the end also like kind of plays into that kind of thing that she's still being haunted by it. It like, is that PTSD or is that actually something kind of that should be paid attention to?
Yeah. Maybe in a reboot we can have someone get flown even further from a ship and come back.
Yeah. That would be perfect.
Can be interplanetary travel from oxygen tanks.
Yep.
That's how space works.
Yeah. Oh, you should say that. That you could say the Martian copied Event Horizon then.
I was
right. Yeah.
On this rewatch. Yeah. I only thought about it because when it was happening, I was like, I always forget about this part where he Iron Man's his way back.
Yeah.
To the ship, and it's like, oh wait, the Martian.
Yeah, pretty much. Then obviously,
often the distance is Wally with his fire extinguisher.
Yep. Yeah. Or gravity as well. Yeah.
Yep. Sandra Bullock.
Yeah.
And that's about it of our hour-longish discussion on Event Horizon. Hope you really enjoyed it. Leave a like if you did. Subscribe if you want to see more. Hit that bell button to be notified of new uploads when they become available. And don't forget to check out Connor and Mike's channels, respectively. They're great guys, do some great content around here. Hopefully we can do some more discussions at some point. Alrighty, until next time, take care.